All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for another MSDW BizApps Marketing Minute. I'm Adam Berezin, co-founder of MSDW. We've got a very special guest on today, someone who I've known for quite some time, and I'm excited to have her tell you her story. Anya Ciercierski, who runs ERP Software Blog, CRM Software Blog, and Cloud ERP Blog. Anya, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Always nice to chat with you, Adam.
Well, I'm thrilled you're here. As kind of a fellow marketer, you've been in this space for quite some time. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the space, and what exactly it is that you do?
So I've actually been in the Microsoft space since 1999. Well, about a year before it became Microsoft, right? Mm-hmm. And working in sales and marketing roles at VAR reseller organizations. And then back in 2009, this idea came up of, why don't we have a group blog? So I kind of started that on the side with my business partner, Dave Foreman, and Jeff Foreman as well. And I bring kind of the Microsoft dynamics and the industry experience to it, and they bring the SEO and technical experience to these group blog sites. And really the whole premise has always been to help partners use the power of the group. So we all, most of us have blog sites, maybe on their own websites, partners and ISVs. But the idea behind this was, if there's a lot of content and a lot of links all in one central location, it drives up the rankings for everybody. So we started very small back in 2009 with 10 pretty visionary partners. I'm happy to say that several of them are still members of our site today. And, fast forward 15 years later, those sites, the 3 different group blog sites that we have really become, the leading group blog sites in our channel. Well known in the space, and we have about 160 ERP and CRM partners that participate to really try to get more people to see their content.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. No, that's super interesting. I mean, I love to kind of hear how other people start their businesses too and come up with the ideas. So you mentioned that back in 2009, you kind of sort of visualized this idea for a group blogging site. Can you just kind of elaborate a little bit more on like what needs you saw for a group blogging site? Because I remember back when we started MSDW back a couple of years before, there were a ton of individual bloggers, but as you said, there really wasn't this sort of like, group blogging site that really acted as this like destination for all these companies to post their blogs. So I'm super interested to kind of hear a little bit more about that, if you could just elaborate.
Yeah, so the story is that I had been at a Microsoft event. I don't know if it was a Convergence or a BBC or whatever it was. And they said, blogging is the new thing. That's what you need to do. And I went home and talked to my search engine optimization consultant for the VAR that I was working at the time. And I said, Microsoft says we have to have a blog. I don't even really know what a blog is, I'll be honest. And he said, well, as a small company, who's going to read it? Who's going to link to it? It might be good for your ego, but it's not going to bring you any leads. And he said a sentence that kind of changed the course of my career, which was, if you had a lot of partners that all wanted to contribute content and links, that could be a powerful blog. And I thought, well, I know a lot of partners. And so, we at that point had some relationships with some people at Microsoft. They actually gave us a little bit of seed money to get started. And the idea just kind of blossomed from there, that again, by all of us contributing, it helps that site to rank higher in the search engine, to have more authority, more domain authority, and to be seen, as more legitimate by the search engines.
That's pretty cool. I'm not an SEO expert, so that's kind of not really my forte, but I do find that interesting, that sort of the power of many ends up producing higher organic search rankings. And I wonder, do you know why you think that is? Is it just because there's more content that's sort of being populated on that site? It's interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a more technical, question my business partners would answer. But, from my understanding, yes, it is quantity, right? We have thousands and thousands and thousands of blog posts on there, all on one specific theme. So, the search engines can really look at this site and say, we know that this site is legitimately about Microsoft Dynamics. So if we serve this up as a result for these queries, in Google's mind, they're serving up a legitimate site. So I think that helps. Also, the fact that, again, my team is really SEO focused. So we spend a lot of effort and time to raise the site up that maybe a small VAR wouldn't be able to do. And I think especially in the beginning and now still, I really try to keep the site accessible for smaller VARs. I've always worked at smaller companies. I always felt that it was important for our sites not to just be, the top tier of the industry that have a huge marketing budget, but I really wanted it to also give a voice and a platform for smaller partners who maybe can't invest very much in SEO for their own sites. They're never going to rank on page one, but by being a part of our site, everybody's lifted up. Yeah,
that's really cool. So they're able to really leverage the success of the group blogging sites to kind of enhance their own blog. Do you find, so now I think you said earlier there's about 160 partners that you currently work with on your site, which is really cool. So if, let's just say there's a company out there that really hasn't done much blogging before, they might have like some other types of content like white papers or videos or case studies. What do you think the best way for them to get started from a blog perspective is? Like what kind of content do you think they should go out there with? Is it more company focused content? Is it, self-promotional content? Is it thought leadership content, educational content? Like what do you typically recommend to ISVs and partners who want to start the whole blogging process, especially when they become partners of your site?
Yeah. So a mistake that I would say that I see is people will just assign the blogging to the marketing department or even to an outsourced writer. And you end up getting very high level, how to choose ERP software, top 10 features in Microsoft Dynamics. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to rank on articles like that, because especially now with AI, anybody can just spit out a dozen of those articles, in a few minutes.
That's true.
So what I really try to help people to understand is that they have so much knowledge and experience trapped within their organizations with the subject matter experts, the owners of the organization, the billable consultants. But it can be very, very difficult to approach a billable consultant and say, I need a blog post. I know in my experience, it would never happen, right?
Sure.
So, my number one tip is to brainstorm a list of topics that perhaps, the top 5 things everybody asks in a sales call, or specific problems that we solved in this niche industry client this year, something like that. Come up with that list and then interview your subject matter expert on Teams or whatever it may be. Get a transcription of that and then make that into a blog post. Because really what you're trying to do is capture their authentic voice, their stories, their experience, and have that really shine through. Because Google is getting better and better and better at detecting AI and giving more authority to posts that they, I speak like it's a person, but that they can identify as a real person. So, some of the most popular posts now on our site, I can tell that when they're used with the perspective of real experiences and stories, that's what makes them really powerful. Not case studies, that's different, but real subject matter expert experience with their lingo and their industry terms and things like that. That again, just a marketing person, even someone like me that's been in the industry for so long, I'm not going to be able to speak in the same way that the person is who uses the software and implements it every day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I find it interesting that you say that. It seems like when you talk to these partners that you are recommending that they kind of take a much more in-depth approach to blogging? Because when I think sort of the old school view on blogging is, okay, if we hire somebody new at the organization, let's post about it. If we update our software, let's post about it. If we're sponsoring an event, let's post about it. But and I personally, I think if it's your own blog, I don't necessarily view that as like a bad thing. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're insinuating is that although those things are okay to have, they should really focus more on really providing like a consistent message to their prospects from like a more strategic point of view, as opposed to just sort of being overtly self-promotional and talking about company news. Do I have that right? So it's almost more like articles as opposed to like the, kind of the traditional, quote unquote blog posts.
Yeah, I think there's a space for company news on their own website, right? Because typically the people who come to a partner website, they usually already know a little bit about you. They're your customers. They maybe had some interaction, and maybe those type of news things give them an overview of who you are. So there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're actually trying to attract new prospects, people that maybe haven't heard of you, what you want is for them to see your name and your expertise all over the web, not just when they get to your website. And when they start seeing your name all over the place, and then they dig down and they say, you know what? I think this company really knows what they're talking about. They've identified this problem. I have that problem. Let me click through and go to their website and learn more.
Sure.
So that's the type of content that is, I will admit it is much harder to create, right? But
yes, I can attest to that too.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's worth it. And so I think we used to think more in terms of quantity over quality. But now, especially with all the Google changes in algorithms and things, quality is becoming so much more important. And when you talk to good marketers, there's ways to keep reusing a good piece of content over and over and over again. So you don't need to feel like you constantly have to be putting out this incredible content, but spend some time crafting a good one and then reuse it, repurpose it, refresh it over and over again, so it keeps working for you.
I agree with that. The importance of reusing content, I think, is pretty. It's pretty critical, especially if you're doing a webcast. You can take that. You can take the topic of the webcast. You can create articles, blog posts, a white paper, and the same can go for a blog post. You can do a blog post and then expand on it to create a webcast, a white paper,
LinkedIn post.
On-demand video. I agree with that. So we both run community platforms, okay? We've been running them for a long time, and I know that there's always some challenges, with running a community-based platform. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced, running the group blogging site over the years? And then I'd like to actually hear from you about what challenges you're facing now, if any. I imagine it's sort of an ever-evolving thing like ours is, but super interested to kind of hear about anything that you want to talk about, regarding those challenges that you've seen running a community-based platform.
Yeah, I would say anytime you're dealing with a large group of customers, you have the challenge of trying to keep them all happy and create policies and things that don't alienate some or reward others and not the group. So I think also we started small. I never honestly imagined how large this would grow, right? So some of the decisions that we made early on kind of limited us. For example, we had the restriction of one user per state. And I remember my husband saying, can you imagine if you got one user per state? And I said, nah, 50 members, that would be amazing. But here we have grown so much bigger than that with multiple sites. And so that was a critical time period. Are we going to change that rule? Will we upset people? Things like that. Pricing is always, a question. So as I said, to make it accessible for smaller partners, but also keep the lights on. And I think also really just, you and I have spoken about it before, that it's hard sometimes, the shoemaker's children, right? It's hard sometimes to do our own marketing and express our own value. I feel like I can tell other companies how to describe themselves and what kind of marketing tactics they should use. And then I look and think, oh gosh, I'm not even doing that myself. I should be doing more of that. So I think when you're so involved with the day-to-day running of the business and keeping the members happy and answering all of their questions, sometimes that marketing yourself the way you should gets pushed to the side. So that's always a challenge. And I think keeping up with the different changes in the software, the branding, right? How Microsoft has changed the name so many times, and how do we deal with that with SEO and all of our sites? And we really mainly focus on the Microsoft Dynamics channel. We do have one ERP Cloud blog that allows posts by, relating to the topics of Acumatica, Intact, NetSuite, all the other ERP Cloud products. But mainly we focus on the Microsoft Dynamics channel. And that's really just, I feel, so that I can stay really in touch with that group and go to the events and know what's going on. And I think that would be really, really difficult to spread ourselves to have that level of depth in all the channels. So that's a challenge too, because certainly it would help us to grow if we did that. But there's only one of me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, with 160 partners, I mean, that's a lot of companies to manage. And
some are very new at blogging and some are very experienced, right? So how can I not bore the really PhD level marketers that we have in our channel, which there's a lot of them, and not overwhelm the ones that are maybe a one-man shop with no marketing department that say, I don't even UTM codes. I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. So there's that balance as well.
Yeah. And when you work with all these different partners, I imagine that there are a good amount that compete with each other. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say the majority of our members compete with each other. And that I think, the partners have to have a bit of a vision, especially the first ones who joined, to be able to say there's enough work for all of us, to see that concept of, if we all help to raise, high tide floats all ships, that it's helping Microsoft content to come up higher. Yes, it's helping my competitors' content, but that's still Microsoft that's helping me as well. But it is, not every partner gets it. I think now that our sites are so large, that's less of an issue, because if there's 5 AP automation vendors listed in our directory, well then, the 6th one should be there as well, because all their competitors are there. So from that angle, I think people do want to be where the rest of the partner is being listed and showing their content. But definitely that's an issue for some partners.
Sure. So when you get a company that becomes a partner, or let's say they're let's say they're an AP automation vendor. I'll just use that as an example, because there are a lot of AP automation.
There's just a few.
Just a couple, and you already have a bunch of their competitors on the site. Will they ever come to you and say, I see that there are 5 or 6 of my competitors on your site. What kind of blogs can I create that will sort of separate myself from the competitors? Like how like guns blazing should I kind of go in to this blogging exercise? And are there specific topics that you'd recommend? And what sort of things do you kind of advise those types of companies?
So I think the smart companies do ask us that, but I will be perfectly honest with you that not very many do. I wish they would, because especially my business partner, Jeff Foreman, I love listening to calls when a member asks him that question: how can I get my post to rank #1 in Google? And I love listening to him because he has very specific directions and best practices. And he will go through their past posts and say, okay, see, this is the problem. This is why you're not ranking. You need to change this. You need to change this. And that's just something we do for free for our members, that, more of them should take advantage of that kind of free SEO help, because they're not tricks, but they're best practices. And those are changing so often. And so if you're not someone who wants to keep up on it, then you need to talk to somebody who does and who knows this industry well enough to know, hey, this is the keyword you have to put in your title. This is why you're not ranking. And this is what you can change.
Yeah. And how can they stand out on your site specifically? So if people are scrolling through, and I'll use kind of AP automation as an example again, and I want to see different posts about AP automation, and there are a lot of them. What, as an AP automation ISV, like what kind of advice would you give me, or even if I'm a partner, in order to create some, compelling blog posts that when people are scrolling on your site, I make sure that mine is able to stand out amongst my competitors?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think there is a big difference between writing for the search engines and writing for the reader.
Yeah.
So even the title of your post, there's one way to structure your title so that the search engines love it, but it might not be the best way to catch someone's eye just as they're scrolling through a list of titles, right?
Yeah,
like on
exactly.
The blog. So that is kind of an art, I will say. I do think that most people find our articles through the search engines. So it would be by typing a specific phrase into Google and then seeing the post come up and clicking directly onto that page, and then hopefully clicking through to the partner's website. So if somebody was just, kind of browsing our site, again, it would be the title, it would be the first paragraph. A lot of times, I remember writing a tip one time about, will I read the second sentence? And the answer is only if your first sentence is really darn good. So it has to have some kind of a draw and a hook in order to draw people in when they just see the title, but also maybe those first few lines, that excerpt. And it's interesting to me that when I look at our top most popular posts, they're not always super long, right? We have a LinkedIn newsletter that we publish for the ERP Software Blog called Trending ERP Topics, and we will list out the top 6 posts from the ERP Software Blog.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so when I look at that, and I think last month the posts were an average of about 760 words, which is not super long. One of them was only 300 words. So it's not always the length that is determining how much traffic it's going to get. And we look at most popular based on not just traffic, but also time on page. So because most traffic can get skewed, right? So we want to make sure that it's good quality. But it's always interesting to me to look at that and to see what is working for people. And
for sure. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I find it interesting when you talk about sort of the length of the posts. And we kind of see that on MSDW. I mean, we're obviously not a blogging site, we're the news and media channel for this space. But, I can say that when people used to post white papers on the site, way back when, sometimes people would literally post 30-page white papers. And sometimes they'd be downloaded a lot, but sometimes the shorter papers would actually be downloaded more. And even we find that in on-demand videos too. Like when we first launched our video platform, I actually thought that the shorter type videos would actually perform better, but actually the longer videos are performing better from a lead gen perspective. So, it's hard to kind of compare like the length of different types of content, but I agree in the sense where it's really the substance that matters. So, that emphasis over quality over quantity, I think is even more important now, especially because there's so much information overload out there, which increased exponentially through during COVID, I think, especially with digital content. So, from a blog perspective, what's some advice that you give to partners to kind of really get them to create blog posts that will essentially kind of cut through all of that noise? Because at the end of the day now, I feel like everybody is fighting for everybody's attention. It's a question of time, which is the most valuable thing in someone's life. So, I guess that's debatable, but time is important in general. And how do you kind of advise ISVs and partners to create content that will be consumed?
Yeah. So I had some really fun conversations at Summit with a few different people. And I realized one of the things that I love to do is just brainstorm with people who think, I don't have anything to write about. And by just talking to them for a few minutes, maybe looking at their site for a few minutes, we can bullet point, well, you could talk about this, you could talk about this, you could talk about this. And you see the light bulb go off and they're like, oh yeah, okay. But almost in their mind, that stuff is too simple. That's too easy. Oh, I didn't realize that's what people wanted. And then I also try to point people to good examples, right? So comparison posts do really, really well on our site. Anything that includes the word compare, comparison versus, but a lot of people don't do them detailed enough. So a Dynamics 365 versus QuickBooks, that's just kind of some fluff. Maybe you're going to get someone to click on it, but it's not what's going to inspire somebody to maybe link to it, to go back to your website and to really consistently keep driving traffic. So, someone like ABC Consulting Group, they have a really nice post comparing BC with NetSuite. It's very detailed. It's obviously someone who has used both products. And that's a good example to look at. I looked at our popular posts. There's another one that's doing really well right now from a pretty new member, IT Fandango. And it's a 5-part series about, it's called 5 Examples of D365 F&O Implementation Challenges. And you and I, Adam, we know that people like to hear about challenges, stories, things like that.
Sure.
And in each post, he has a worst case example and how to avoid it. And it's very specific. And you know that he's been through this and he's telling you what not to do. Ethotech had one, the worst time to implement compensation management software. Okay, when I see that title, I know that they're going to tell me something based on their personal experience. That's extremely valuable. DLD Consulting had one that started out with a story, and the headline of it was a breakfast conversation that sparked change, and it was something about why you should do process reviews for Dynamics GP. But again, it showed that it was a real person talking. It was based on his experience, and it was detailed. And I think the more real, the more detailed people can get, the better. Niche industry articles do very well. And again, that's usually because they're showing what they've actually done in that industry. So Dynamics 365 for the waste management industry, or 5 things people in waste management need to know. You're not going to be able to write that unless you've had some experience. So those do well. So comparisons, stories, hitting on what not to do, that works. And niche articles, and really anything to do with pricing. So I would say there's a company called Cafe to Code. They do a great job of something I've kind of termed pick apart posts, meaning they will really pick apart like Dynamics 365 license types and pricing, and just dig down into very, very specific, pick it apart and give people information. That's something that might seem easy to someone in your team, but to throw around the different license type names, but that's exactly what a prospect wants to know. And that those do very well also. So those are some of the examples that I might point to somebody to say, look at what's most popular and try to not plagiarize it, but do something similar with your own voice.
Interesting. And what about in terms of speaking directly to like a buyer persona? So, you mentioned going niche focused from an industry perspective and a platform perspective. What about kind of diving a little bit deeper on top of that, and speaking directly to a type of user, or even a specific type of focus area, like reporting or something? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And do you find that some partners of the different blog sites create content not just for the buyer personas, but also for where certain buyers are in the purchase cycle stage?
Definitely people do it in terms of where they are in the purchase stage, because there's very basic how to choose ERP software, how to choose a partner, all the way down to very specific, how to use this function in the software, right? So
Sure.
there are definitely posts for the different stages. In terms of the buyer persona, I think that's a very, very good idea. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head of partners that are doing that. I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
But that leads me to believe that more of them should be doing it, right? So
I agree.
could we have posts that say why an AP clerk needs to do XYZ in Dynamics 365, something like that? Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. So everyone listening should
Yeah, right.
on that tip.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I've always felt that speaking directly to the person that you're actually trying to woo or entice is the best approach. I know when companies will do various content exercises on MSDW, a lot of them will get specific in terms of the industry, the Microsoft business application, even the focus area reporting or inventory management. But a lot of them still have trouble taking that, adding that extra element to, I guess the content consumption equation, as I call it, and that element being the actual specific person at the organization that you want this to reach. And we can do that from a targeting perspective, obviously at MSDW, but I would, just as you said, I would love to see more companies speak directly to those specific people in the content, in addition to targeting them too through, our platform and your platform. So I do think that's super important. It's funny. I don't know why more ISVs and partners don't do that. I don't know if it's a comfort thing, or if they're sort of too quick to jump to, here's why you need, an AP solution for Business Central or something. So they're really just focusing on the platform's limitations and how their solution kind of compensates for those limitations or fills those gaps. But I think speaking more directly to the actual person at the organization that would be responsible for, those various functions, I think would go a long way. So I would love to see more companies try that.
I think in my experience, people are a little bit afraid sometimes of alienating part of their audience. So they see it as, if I only speak to the AP clerk, well, then what about the CFO? I want to sell to them too. I see that a lot with products. So people will write a post about Dynamics 365, and I'll ask, well, is this about Business Central or F&O? Well, we do both. Okay, but we need to really kind of laser in if we're going to try to rank for any of these keywords and hit the right target size of company either or needs. Yeah. So maybe you need to write two posts, one that really focuses down on the BC audience and one for the F&O audience, and be very specific. So I do think sometimes people are afraid of being too specific because they want everybody. Yeah. But by trying to get everybody, you are getting a lot of the wrong people.
Sure.
So it's better to really focus on to your point, your ideal customer. And then I do believe that'll attract the ancillary customers as well.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to what you said several minutes ago, which is kind of quality over quantity. That applies to the actual number of people that you want to consume your content, I think, as well. So yeah, that's super interesting. So, all right. So you have these three awesome blog sites that you've run for a long, long time. You're up to 160 partners, which is amazing. what's ahead for the group blogging sites? Like, what's sort of what's your ultimate vision beyond what you've done now? Because you've done a lot, and it's it's super impressive. It's awesome. So yeah. So what's next? What's next on the docket? Yeah.
We're evolving as well, and we have a lot of internal conversations about this too, because AI is changing everything, and of course, it's changing our direction as well. It's and we're learning how to adjust. How do we get our blog articles pulled by those AI snippets that have now taken up the majority of the homepage? So we can't just rank on an article anymore. We need to really focus on playing nice with AI, and we're expanding more on LinkedIn, doing LinkedIn newsletters, LinkedIn articles to promote our members' content, kind of taking that top content. We are doing more with videos. I'm going to start a series called One Fail, One Fix that will be very narrow, targeted videos that we will then use on YouTube to drive that traffic. We're doing some group content. We used to do that in the past. There's kind of the same vision of let's all contribute to the blog. This is let's all contribute content to an ebook and then all share it out. Starting that program up again. And we're even trying some maybe kind of wacky stuff. There's some new AI programs out there that actually will turn blog posts into podcast and audio content.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's cool and scary at the same time. It makes me not actually trust podcasts anymore. Nice that people can see our faces if they want to. They know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not robots, everybody.
No, so, but there are new things out there, and we're trying that because there are a lot of people out there that are saying SEO is dead, blogging is dead. It's not dead. It's just changed a lot, and we need to be able to keep up with those changes. But prospects' desire for good information, that will never change. And that is
a great point.
You have the opportunity to really become an authoritative, trustworthy voice and try to cut through a lot of the junk that's out there. And that's what we're really trying to focus this next step of the blog sites is really to focus less on traffic and numbers and focus more on authority and trust.
No, that's great. I love that. We kind of have a similar approach at MSDW. So that's great to hear. Well, listen, I just want to, give you a big thanks for joining this episode. It's been awesome to talk with you. I know that MSDW and ERP Software Blog, we partner up on a lot of different things. So, we're really excited to see what else we can do with you, and really, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. It's such an awesome story, and it's been such a huge platform for our community. So I know, speaking for myself, and I'm sure, for everybody else in the channel too, we're all really excited to see what else you can come up with and how much more you can grow the site. So thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.